Now I'm in Georgia Zone 8A, and right here, citrus and bananas are not the ideal fruit to try to grow. But with this little plant right here, Tithonia diversifolia, Mexican sunflower, it's possible. So we're gonna take you through the whole steps on how we use this as a biological stimulant. Now that we've got our first rack of flowers coming in on it, she's gonna be screaming for this potassium that this plant is a powerhouse in. Mexican sunflower get as tall as 12 feet. But as you can see here, we've been tipping this baby. And by tipping it, it's giving us the maximum potential of what we need in order to be able to harvest and feed all of our citrus as well as our banana plants. A natural potassium powerhouse. So we're going to be showing you how we use this plant, how we make an FPJ, and how we take that banana plant to the next level and get us some fruit. So early in the morning is the best time you want to harvest this Mexican sunflower, because at this time you got the auxins, gibberellins, and the cytokinins all at the tip of these leaves, and we just want the top 2 to 3 inches, and that's going to get us to kick that bag, and we go into the dirt and get that potassium. Now you might be saying to yourself, my Mexican sunflower don't look like that Mexican sunflower. Well, that's one of the things that we've done. We tip our Mexican sunflower, and you can see here, this is what we're looking for out of this bush here. And the more you tip it, the more it's going to give you tips. And this is the magic behind the Mexican sunflower. We're not doing steep cheese because I think that's not using this plant to its full potential. What we are doing is FPJs, and that's a fermented plant juice. And again, we're just taking those tips off. You see that turgor pressure? That's telling you that all those hormones and all that energy is pushed to the top. And we're going to be harvesting that today. And that's going to be our feed for not only that citrus that we have over there, but also for the banana plants. When we're talking about harvesting the Mexican sunflower, timing is everything. This plant's been pumping all the water and nutrients up to it overnight. And so early in the morning, that's when it's filled with all those auxins, gibberellins, and cytokinins. And as you can see with most of your garden plants, when you go out to your garden, you're going to see them at their best, and that's the turgor pressure that they're going to have in all the saps, and that's everything pushing to the tips of the leaves. That's when this plant is at its best. We're not going to chop this plant down to the ground. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be removing the top tips of this, and that's what we call apical dominance. What's going to happen after we chop the tips on this is going to force the growth from the smaller branches on here, and that's going to keep this thing regenerative throughout the season. So we're going to always have a massive amount of this Mexican sunflower on hand to continue feeding the garden. And that's one of the things that I do a little different than a lot of the people who have this plant, like the comfrey or the stinging nettle, your alfalfa. They'll chop basically the entire plant down, and then you're left with just a bare plant that's going to struggle to rebuild itself. So natural resources of this plant, those things that have come up from the ground overnight, that's pushed all of those hormones up into the tips of this plant, and that is what we're going to be harvesting this morning. Now, you know, one of the things that I always talk about is cleaning those snips before you get to cutting on a new plant. So we're going to take our alcohol, put a little paper towel on here, and we're just going to clean our snips off before we start cutting on our Mexican sunflower. So what we're going to be talking about also is the NPK value. So you probably already know that I grow comfrey as well as alfalfa and stinging nettle also. This is the baby when it comes to the dynamic accumulators of phosphorus and potassium out of the soil. Now we have a nice NPK ratio, but we're really not concerned with the NPK. Although we have a 3% of nitrogen in here, a 0.5 of phosphorus, which is extremely good for any dynamic accumulator. And then we have a 4.0 on the potassium. That is what makes this the king of the garden when it comes to fruiting. So we want to keep in mind that we're only going to be taking the top 2 to 3 inches off these plants. And we're going to be putting them in there, and then we're going to dice them up really good so that we'll have them in the finest form so we can extract as much of the nutrients out of here as we can. That's going to stimulate the rest of the growth on this plant. And that one bowl is going to give us enough to make a half a jar of our FPJs. This one will take a little more off of it. We're going to fill our bowl up as we always do. Again, when we're doing this right here, we're taking the most powerful hormones out of this plant and we're biologically transferring them over into our other plants. This is not what we call a fertilizer. It is literally a biological stimulant. And this is one of the reasons why you see that squash cage with Godzilla over there looking the way that she does. And we do equal parts brown sugar to equal parts Mexican sunflower, Tithonia diversifolia. If you live in a warmer climate, now the Mexican sunflower might not be the plant for you unless you're prepared to really manage this plant because she can get out of control. I put one in the ground last year just to see how it fared through the winter. She didn't make it through the winter, so I'm pretty confident that this is something that we can control here. So now this year, I have a couple of them in the ground. This is not the lazy man's plant. So this is something that you want to keep in mind if you're living in one of the warmer climates and you want to grow this Mexican sunflower, Tithonia diversifolia. We're going to go over here to our table and we're going to show cutting this up. But if you want to see how we actually made our FPJ, we have a video on spring starting and we're doing it with our Himbit FPJ, but it's the exact same formula. So if you want to be able to see that video, you can go and check that video up. We'll put that up in the description there. So you look all down here and you can see all down the stalk of this plant, all these tips. This is what makes this plant so valuable. And as long as you tip this plant, she's going to give her maximum harvest every single time. And even after all of that, look at all the leaves still on here. We're going to leave that out here for her to photosynthesize, but we're going to remove all of these tips. This is what we're doing. We're removing all of the tips, and that's going to push out even more growth. So we want to harvest these early morning when that turgor pressure is up and that morning dew is still on the plants, because that's when those cytokinins, the auxins and gibberellins are at their peak. And that is what we want to harvest. Even when we're doing this FPJ, we want to make sure that we don't rinse those, because that's where all those natural yeast and bacteria are going to be on the tips of this plant early in the morning. And that is what's going to jumpstart this fermentation. Now we want to make sure that we get these diced up before they start to wilt. So you know we had to bring out those, Freddy Krueger's. So what are cytokinins? Cytokinins is that growth stimulator on the plant that keeps that plant looking healthy and strong, that vitality, the vigor in the plant. The tips, that's what gets the plants to stretch out. Those are called the gibberellins. And they're responsible for that massive growth that you see in these tips. And that's why we want to harvest those tips. And then you're going to have auxins, which is the overall health of the plant. And that is what signals the plant for root development. So we're talking about a powerhouse of stimulants as opposed to a fertilizer. And I can't say that enough times. So if you want to, again, see how we finish this FPJ, watch this video here, and it's going to show you how we make that FPJ. Growing out the box, Tithonia diversifolia, Mexican sunflower.